This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1734, Avengers Endgame movie review.
Yeah, hi, Kevin.
I'm Kevin Moyer.
Hi, Matt.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Ian Levinstein.
And I'm Chris Everly.
Some nice music swell there for everybody.
love that
Clutch
music.
with the music, brother.
Choice.
I was just thinking they were so successful they even brought Kevin back from being that staff editor.
I was not in the quantum realm.
Well, you know, I mean, when they said everybody was coming, we had to make sure it was literally everybody.
Whatever it takes.
Exactly. God, every time I hear whatever it takes, the rest of my brain fills in the Degrassi theme, so I can't help but go, I know I can make it through.
I'll have to admit, when I text out that photo that I was there and put whatever it takes, I was kind of hoping people would respond back with whatever it takes, like in the trailer, but that kind of got shot to shit. So.
That's only because we weren't there too.
Oh,
That's true.
You're like, whatever it takes. I'm like, putz. You're there, I'm not.
Gentlemen, we gather here today to review a movie that is so many years in the making. Avengers Endgame, the end of Phase 3, and of course, spoilers out the wazoo for this one.
Yeah.
So if you have not seen it, go ahead and see it and then come back to this episode, because seriously, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Seriously.
$1.2 billion opening weekend.
My God.
I think it's 1.4 now.
It's
They're
pretty...
predicting $2 billion at the end of this weekend.
Oh, my God.
Is that
Freaking
worldwide or
many.
just America?
That's what it is.
Worldwide.
Okay.
Yep.
1.2 freaking many.
Now, I wanted to bring up on the before we get started with the main episode that on the day that we record it, it is May the 2nd, and we are all gathered here today. I'm kind of glad that it is a full house because this is 5 years to the day of the passing of the one and only Shiznit Pip, Jamie D. So here's to you, Jamie. I drank one in your honor tonight, and I'm sure you're watching down on us right now, yelling at how happy you were that that Captain America had Mjolnir in his hands.
And I'm positive he was in spirit seat conducting along with that Avengers theme that you played.
Most definitely.
Absolutely.
And Murd, how would Jamie pronounce Mjolnir?
Mjolnir?
Yes.
Or Mew Mew.
Mew Mew.
I did like Mew Mew.
Yeah, he did like that. That cracked him up.
I was thinking about how when we did one of the anniversary episodes, I guess, and I was asking everyone some questions, and his was, which would you rather have, Thor's hammer or Cap's shield? I remember Brian said, if you had one, you could just take the other one. So I was thinking of that, and then he ultimately went with Cap's shield instead.
Good point.
And then Drunk Cap called in shortly thereafter.
Of course.
Hey, Drunk Cap, you're out there somewhere, man. It's time. We need to find out what happened when you went back in time.
Hell yeah. That's a good point.
True.
Oh, boy. Well,
Can open up the gates to many realms.
considering that, Kevin, it's so good to hear your voice on an episode, man. We're gonna have to start off with you on this one.
Oh, don't do that.
But I like it. I like putting you on the spot.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you guys, gave me the heads up, and I was able to make it on. But obviously, I try to, come on time anytime I can make it. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Go ahead and give us your initial thoughts on the movie.
I've only seen it once, and it was good. I guess that's how I when I texted Matt, and I also texted my daughter after I saw it, and I was just like, it was good, but it wasn't great. And I said I liked it, but I didn't love it. There was moments that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I just, evaluate my experience every time I see one of these movies and just how I feel about it, when I'm watching it, and also after I've completed watching it. And I was just like, that's kind of how I was. It wasn't. It didn't bowl me over. I thought it was. I actually was kind of, I guess, feeling almost a little bored at times. I was just like, wow, okay, can you move this along? Like the first half of the movie to me was like kind of trudging, in a way. But yeah, it just that's what it is for me. It just wasn't. It's certainly to me not the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. But it was a good one. So I want to watch it again. I feel that this is one of these movies that it pays to watch it twice.
Yeah,
I concur wholeheartedly, Kevin. I saw it twice, absolutely.
And that's kind of the impression that I've received, from others as well. That and I was talking to Matt about it, and I said, I want to see it again, and just kind of be able to really pay attention and absorb more things. And I probably will have a better reaction and a response watching it the second time. I'm expecting that and anticipating that. So maybe I will enjoy it more, but yeah, I certainly didn't walk out of the theater going like, oh, I'm just supercharged and that was awesome. And I'm, it's not the same. I didn't have the same feeling that I did when I watched Infinity War. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed Infinity War more.
Okay. All right, fair enough. I mean, and that's valid, honestly, because sometimes you get so hyped for something after seeing the first time around that it doesn't quite live up to where your hype was.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of that, and I did question that. I always try to make sure that when I go into these movies that I try to have little or no expectation. I've learned over the years of being blessed with all these superhero movies, and I've learned that to not go into it with high expectations or any type of expectation. Just try to go in there and just be entertained, and that's always my approach. And that was my approach for this as well. But in the same token, I have to say that I remember going into it going like, well, this is a continuation, of another story. And I did really enjoy Infinity War, so I can't say that I had no expectation.
Right.
I think it's very difficult to not. It's like this is a culmination of a story that I enjoyed, the setup in the beginning. And, so I was hoping it was at least that, way, if not better. And also, it's also the culmination of, 11 years of movies, So, I mean, it's got a lot to pull and a lot to live up to. So I can't say it's impossible to not go in with expectations, but I don't think that it's inconceivable, to want to go in with it, Right. And I think I have to be realistic and honest with myself and just say that, I think I did have a level of expectation. I wasn't, chomping at the bit. I definitely wanted to see it, but I just wanted to go in and have, a great story and be entertained. That's my intention each time. So
fair enough.
So I was entertained. I wasn't floored or bowled over by it.
All right. Murd, how about you?
I'm glad you threw it to me next, Ian, because my response is actually very close to Kevin's in several ways. People have been asking me, people who hadn't gone to see it during the opening weekend, people who weren't by and large comic book fans or even Marvel movie fans, have been asking me how the movie was. And my response, I found myself saying it was good enough. And that's about the way I feel. It was entertaining. I definitely agree with what Kevin said about how it was kind of a trudge or a slog at the beginning. And I even went in expecting that. I mean, after the way Infinity War left things, there had to be a mourning period of sorts at the beginning of this movie. So I was expecting the first act to be mostly slow-moving grief stuff, coping stuff, just adjusting to the new global status quo stuff. And then, so that was slow. It felt slow to me even when I was expecting it to be slow. And then in the second act, when things started to pick up, when the torch of hope was reignited by the arrival of Ant-Man, then things started to get elaborate and gimmicky. It was basically a a long, intricate, and entertaining for what it was worth clip show for the second act of the film, the whole time heist sequence. There were some real funny moments, some emotional gut shots along the way. And then there was the third act, which was the big payoff, which was worth like the whole price of admission just in and of itself. That's where most of the awesome of the movie was concentrated to the back end. So I didn't leave the theater feeling cheated or disappointed or anything like that. But like Kevin, I liked it. I didn't love it necessarily. I do think that Infinity War was better. It is my opinion that, as so often happens in serialized entertainment, whether on film, television, or in the comics, in the case of this 2-film series, the resolution was not quite equal to the buildup. But yeah, I would say this movie, it lacks a bit in story value. The emotional payoff was there. The spectacle was definitely there. The retrospective qualities, looking back on the past 11 years worth of storytelling was there. To employ a syntactic metaphor, if you may indulge this recovering English major for a moment, if you can think of the first 3 phases of MCU filmmaking as like a long sentence with each film therein constituting a word, I would say this 20-second entry is less the last word in that sentence as it is a punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. It caps things off, and it's more valuable and more enjoyable as like the big fireworks show at the end of it all than it is as like an actual story as a part of the sequence. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I was just cheering along with anybody else during the many cool moments that were packed into the battle royal at the end. But it did get a little bit tedious along the way. I'll agree with Kevin on that.
Just out of curiosity, I assume you prefer Empire over Jedi?
Well, see that it gets my ranking. I've mentioned this on the show a few times. My favorite is definitely the original Star Wars,
right? Which
I will never call A New Hope. It is called Star Wars.
Yes.
And only that. Followed by the first 20 minutes of Return of the Jedi, the Jabba the Hutt sequence.
Yeah.
Then Empire, and then the rest of Return of the Jedi.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough. Shane, let's roll over to you.
Well, I will say I loved it. I went in, I had a great time. I laughed, I cried. Some things surprised me, and some things I was surprised I got surprisingly close on thinking would happen, as I'm sure many people did, but I was still surprised at myself. I do think Infinity War is a better movie, and I do think other Marvel movies are better, but I was completely satisfied, and I will watch it many more times to come. I do wonder if watching it together back to back with Infinity War would make it seem more of a complete movie, because it really is the second part of a story. But I definitely think Infinity War was a better played out story. But I completely enjoyed thoroughly and came away loving Endgame.
And Matt.
Well, I enjoyed it. When I saw Meg the next morning, 'cause I saw a late showing, she asked what I thought, and I said that I felt as though there was a lot to the way everything that I felt. There's a lot to unpack. There was a lot of baggage to kind of unpack. I actually like it more than Infinity War. To some extent, I thought there was several parts of Infinity War that were predictable, and to some extent, this one as well. But I know how people got weepy-eyed at some of the people dusting at the end of Infinity War, and I did. In fact, I still say that the Spider-Man death was kind of more hokey than actually gut-wrenching. Whereas in this, I found myself, the hardest character I found to watch the arc of was Hawkeye. And to some extent, I put myself into his situation, where it starts off where he's basically on house arrest, so he's not superhearing. He gets to spend all this time with his family. Then boom, they're gone. And then 5 years later, he gets brought back in by probably his next closest kind of family member, Natasha. He gets a shot to see if they can go back in time. Here's his daughter that he hasn't seen in 5 years, her voice, and right before he's able to see her again, he gets pulled back to the present, and then Natasha winds up dying. And then there's the emotional side of his family returning. So I just following that, I was like, man, that's just a real roller coaster, and it was good to see him actually kind of get a good arc. I guess because it always seemed like he's in the background. The other character that I wanted to see more of an arc for was Cap. So I felt you didn't really get that in Infinity War. I was more satisfied this time around. Same with Tony. But like I said, there were some parts here that I thought were predictable. There were some rumors out there that, fortunately, it seemed like there was some stuff that was true in the reported leaks, and then there was some stuff that was just way off. So even like the very ending, there were still some things I was like, huh, so you're doing this. That's not bad. There's some characterizations that I felt took a back step from the last movie in here. But for the most part, I felt satisfied. I'm one of those who I really like to see how they connected it with as many of the prior movies as they could. Mm-hmm. Even the fact that we got Jarvis from Agent Carter.
Yes.
That actor came back. So I like to see they pulled those little things. I saw a lot of people say online that they finally made Thor, The Dark World watchable, which I was like, I didn't think it was unwatchable. I thought it wasn't too bad.
It's just forgettable.
But I liked how they pulled things. I know it was kind of a best of, as Adam described it in the second act, but I like to see how they put things together. And to some extent, at the end of it, I was like, this kind of feels like when I was done watching the series finale of Lost, just with everything that happened from the beginning to the end, and the kind of different beats they had to touch on with majority of the original part of the remaining original cast that were on the island. So I enjoyed it, and I'm sure in the second viewing I'll probably enjoy it a little bit more, because I know I've been watching some illegal clips on YouTube that were taken, and there's like specific scenes I'm like, man, I'm really jazzed. I got to see this again the way it's supposed to be. So
how many trips to the Philippines have you taken to see the movie?
That's classified.
And Mr. Eberly.
All right. Well, I love this film, and I loved it even more when I saw it the second time, and I'm sure I'll love it even more than that when I see it a third time. The key for me is that the Russos and the screenwriters, who's, forgive me, I don't remember their names at the moment, they did not sacrifice character for overwhelming action spectacle. Every character, every major character among the original Avengers and a couple other characters got their due in this movie. And what I thoroughly relished was how I call it the triumvirate: Thor, Iron Man, Captain America. They completed the character arc for those three icons. From the beginning in the previous decade through this film, I really felt like when this movie was over, okay, they have taken each of these characters on an epic journey, and they've put them in different places. Obviously, some more final than others. That really worked for me, and I thought was immensely moving. I had very high expectations because I have such high expectations for the directors, because they've done some of my favorite Marvel films, and my expectations were met. And I have a lot of notes I'll talk about as we move. I don't want to hog it all now, but you know what? Let me talk about one scene quickly. It kind of summarizes where I'm going here. When they're trying to figure out what to do in the Avengers headquarters, and Natasha and Tony are laying on the table, and Bruce as Intelligent Hulk, which is one of the scene stealers of the whole film when he's Intelligent Hulk, when he's on the floor, and there's that familiarity and that quirkiness, they're trying to figure out what to do. And I'm like, okay, like that one scene, that's Marvel. That's why Marvel is what it is. That's why, frankly, the Marvel movies in general are better than the DC movies, because they've so taken the greatness of the characters, the essence of those characters from the comics, and the better writers and directors have figured out how to capture that on film. And in this movie, you just saw that again and again and again. And I got to tell you, when Tony died, like, people around me were sobbing in tears. When the Black Widow sacrificed herself, I heard people like, gut wrenching. What so floored me about this film, and I was telling this to Murr because he and I saw it together, that on the one hand, you're like, okay, the comics are almost like gone now. Like virtually everyone's in this movie, they're not reading the comic books. But the characters have become so embedded in our culture now because of these films and what Marvel Studios has achieved and what Netflix has achieved, that people were like, when Spider-Man appeared, like the theater erupted in cheers.
Yeah.
When the Black Panther walked out of the portal, like people were like, and like cheering. And in a way, I'm almost envious because I'm so well versed in the comic book universe. Like you kind of predict a lot of things that are going to happen. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of other people who are not, I can imagine what this experience was like. And I'm almost like, okay, if I was like a little kid seeing this movie, like, is this like being in 1977 seeing Star Wars?
Yeah, it is.
Like, I think we can't overstate what has been accomplished here.
Oh my God.
And the impact it has had on not just our popular culture, but not to be melodramatic, the whole frickin' world. I mean, the records that were made in China, in India. I mean, I think it's a monumental achievement. And the last thing I'll say in my intro is that the fact that they did not sacrifice again the vital, quiet moments for these characters that is so essential to what make Marvel great, I thought was all over this movie, and I was utterly satisfied. And I can't wait to talk about the Thor as the Big Lebowski.
Which, no, you don't.
Oh, yes, I do. And that's all I'll say for now.
Before we go on, I'll give you a second there.
Yeah.
But one of the things, I still saw a review. I saw it more of the last movie, this one, how the best part about the movie is also the worst part. That if you've been following the majority of these movies, if not all of them, it's great fan service. If you're coming into this completely having watched nothing before, you're going to be wasting your time because it's not a standalone movie and it should have been a standalone movie. And I keep thinking, is this someone who never read comics before? I mean, the stories are always ongoing. Yeah. And I know that's why the big complaint is every movie seems to be setting up the next one. To some extent, that's what comic books do. You can't look at it as a movie. You got to look at it. I began to look at this as the MCU as basically a TV series. This is basically the end of season 1. Well, I guess the next Spider-Man movie is going to be the official end, but this is just the first season of the MCU, and then we're going to be starting on next season. So, you can miss a couple episodes and still get the gist of the overall arc. But for the most part, if you're watching everything, the payoff is going to be in the end of that season finale.
And just to say about that, I think Marvel movies themselves have done a better job of being standalone movies that anybody can step in and watch, yet giving a little bit either in the movie or in the end credit scene to hand it off to the next movie without being overly done. I think very few of them would be where somebody could go in and would be completely lost. I think Endgame is one of those movies, but most of the other ones you can go in and watch having not watched anything else and still get it.
Yeah, well, because Endgame is a part 2. I mean, even if they changed the name from Infinity War Part 2 to Endgame, it's still part 2 of Infinity
War.
And that's the way it was set up. I want to jump back in my quantum time machine real quick to Saturday, July 28th, 2007. I'm sitting in Hall H in San Diego. It's my first ever San Diego Comic-Con, and I happened to be in the room during the Iron Man / Hulk movie panel.
Wow.
And I get to see the footage from Iron Man for the first time. And I was not exactly pumped for that movie leading up to that panel. I had seen the so-so comic book adaptations up until that point that still left me, wanting. And I wasn't exactly thrilled, watching Elektra and Daredevil, dance at in a playground didn't exactly wow me, So I'm thinking to myself, what, they're making an Iron Man movie and they're making an Iron Man movie with Robert Downey Jr. I mean, he's literally Tony Stark, so I guess that could work, but all right. And I saw that footage and I was floored as to how great that looked. And now flash forward to this last weekend, where I'm sitting there in Yonkers, New York, at the Cinema Deluxe movie theater, and I'd never been to that movie theater before. It was a gorgeous theater with some reclining seats. It worked really, really well, and I'm watching the culmination of what I saw in 2007 unfold on screen, and I could not be happier, because not only was it the culmination of this 2-part epic, it was a culmination of everything that had been leading up to this epic since 2008, and most importantly, it acts as an a literal endgame for the Avengers that we've known to love up until this point, the ones that were introduced in the original movies. This could easily be the last movie for Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, clearly for Natasha, rest in peace. I'll talk about that more later. And Hawkeye, if they really wanted it to be. We'll probably still see more of Thor, and we'll probably still see some more of Hulk and smatterings of the others. But, for the most part, this was the culmination of something that had been set up for years and years and years. It's unprecedented that we got as many good movies as we did, even the ones that were so-so.
Yeah.
Were still good in their own way. And I was in tears at points during this movie. I was filled with joy at parts during this movie, and it was just absolutely the epic conclusion that I wanted it to be. So it very much lived up to expectations, and for me, because of how much character building and character growth and character culmination existed in this movie, for me it's better than Infinity War. Because Infinity War had a lot to pack in. It had a lot to pack in its 2.5 hour runtime to try and get to where they were going. And I'd heard that Endgame's script was written first, and then they had to go back and write Infinity War. Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not entirely sure about that. I may be blowing smoke out my ass here, but I heard that from at least one source that had stated that, which would explain why Infinity War is a little bit more piecemeal and putting characters in place to where they need to be. But Endgame felt like an ending in so many ways, and they capped that with the very subtle conclusion they did with no extra credit scene like Shane was talking about to set up the next movie, because this is a final movie for all intents and purposes. Like, there's still going to be more Marvel movies, but this is the end of what we've been leading up to, and you just hear the clang, clang, clang of Tony Stark in that cave in 2008 building his armor.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have ended better for me, and the movie itself just was dynamite. I loved it.
I actually just heard this week that reportedly this will be the last movie that has the Avengers in it.
Really?
So it doesn't mean there won't be future Avenger movies, but ones that are titled The Avengers won't be anymore. So it could be the Mighty Avengers, Secret Avengers, but it just won't be
West
the
Coast Avengers?
Could be West Coast Avengers.
They definitely seem to be setting up Young Avengers, so that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something I want to say, and it's a little self-serving because I want to see if anybody else thought the same way as I did after Infinity War. I really thought that once Infinity War ended, that Cap and Tony were going to be done in some capacity. And we were hearing that from contractual, real-life perspective. But I thought Tony would either die or get injured so badly that he would retire. And I thought Cap would be thrown back in time. Now, I thought that Tony, my real thought was Tony would be paralyzed and the suit could help him when it needed to. And that's how they'd keep him around every now and then, maybe every few years. And I thought Cap would look to everyone else in current time to be dead from some explosion, but he would get thrown back in time and be stuck there and live his life. So I wasn't terribly far off. Did anybody else come close to thinking that?
Not on that stuff. No, I guessed one or two things. I guessed, like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I guessed the end scene to that. When I was doing my review for Infinity War for Comic Timing, I guessed that it was going to end with Ant-Man stuck in the quantum realm, and then we'd see what happened in Endgame. But as for the fates of the other characters, no, I actually thought we were getting Grey Hulk in this, and not Prof Hulk. So I was way off on that. I thought that Iron Man was going to survive the way you consider Shane. So I was maybe a little bit off, more than a little bit off on that. And Cap, I thought he was going to retire in some way. I didn't think it would be in this fashion. So that's I had no idea what to expect.
Well, what I liked most about Cap's ending was that the Russos when I think of the Russos directing, they directed Civil War, they directed Winter Soldier. I thought it was very appropriate they ended the whole movie with Steve, back in the 40s
Mm-hmm.
with Peggy, because for me, those two, Civil War and Winter Soldier, are two of the strongest of all the Marvel films for me. And I just loved how they took the Steve Rogers character on such an arc, and like the scene where he's in the like the therapy group with Jim Starlin.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful little scene, because they took such great pains through all of Steve Rogers' appearances to really emphasize not just the soldier, but the humanity of that character, and how he is not like, the robotic flag waving, I'm going to do what the government tells me. Like very quickly they dispelled, like, that is not Captain America. And I thought it was so beautifully done the way that they ended his arc. And I love that he gave the shield to Sam and not to Bucky.
Yeah.
I just thought that made sense within the confine, and the fact that Bucky kind of nodded at Sam like, yeah, go and take it. That just worked so well, and I can't wait to see that Netflix, that Disney streaming series they're going to do.
Oh yeah.
With the two of them. That's probably going to be sensational. But that arc for Steve, and I thought, and I wanted to comment again how Chris Evans was so magnificent in that role. I never for one moment did not believe he was Steve Rogers. Like, he was so perfectly cast, and he so clearly understood the nuances of that character. It was such a thrill and a pleasure to see how they finished out his arc. And as you mentioned with Tony, the death of Tony totally made sense to me.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily expecting it, but didn't surprise me either, because they gave him like his moment where he had a family. He got to like kind of live for 5 years in the cabin with Pepper and their child Morgan, and he got to have that life. And then, what's always one of the great aspects of the Tony Stark character? He always has to kind of rise above his sort of natural, sort of self-centered nature and realize, okay, I'm the only guy who can really make a difference here in this particular problem. Mm-hmm. And like Pepper basically said, like, look, in so many words, you got to go fix this time problem now, because he's the only person who can really do it. Bruce could kind of do it, but Bruce is a gamma scientist. He's not really like what Tony can do. And it just made sense. And there was, again, the attention to subtlety at the funeral service at the end. When you look at Doctor Strange's face, and again, Benedict Cumberbatch is a tremendous actor, how haunted he looks in that just quick moment, because he always knew that Tony had to die. Yeah. And it just worked. And again, just quickly, and then I'll let other people talk, of course. What I loved about the Thor thing, I mean, Chris Hemsworth clearly likes to do comedy. And he obviously was pushing for that. You saw that in Ragnarok as well. And some people like that, other people don't. I loved it. But you got to remember that in his mind, like, Thor is the ultimate warrior. He failed. He could not kill Thanos. And when he did kill him, it didn't matter anymore. And, it basically destroyed him, essentially. And he retreated into this, granted comedic, but ultimately this shell of drink and debauchery and just, wasting away. And I love the idea of him kind of – because Thor never really wants to be the king. Right. And then now that he gets this chance to go off with the Guardians, and I really hope they keep him in that next film they're going to do.
Oh, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah, but just me spouting there for a moment. But that, again, the way they handled those three characters, I couldn't have been happier.
I mean, I will add to that, and I agree with you on the Steve Rogers factor. You made many points there that I totally agree with. I know Matt and I had spoken about it, I think, before the first Avengers movie came out.
Yep.
And the point that I emphasized to him, I said, if you don't nail Cap, the Avengers won't work.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
As strong as the other characters were in their own appearances, if you didn't have the character of Captain America in that team, it just would not have worked. And I loved, Chris Evans taking that role, and I thoroughly enjoyed the first Captain America movie. I thought it was done very well. I loved the fact it was a period piece. There were so many things I liked about it.
Yep.
And you could see him embrace it. But each appearance that he gave after that, you would just see this growth of this character, and to take it a step further, even him personally, you saw him change personally after embodying this role. You know, this role affected him on a personal level, and that made it even more so. And he was the high point of this movie. He's brilliant. I think that this portrayal of Cap and you know, it in every movie it's central to the Avengers. You know,
Yep.
and you know, like in Ultron, you know, they had the running gag, you know, language, you know, is that, you know, something that way. But then in this one, you could see like he was always that upbeat, positive attitude. You know, he was the one that led them, you know, and you got that. And I'm so grateful that it all transpired the way it did. You know, it was kind of like the perfect storm. You got the right people to write the movies, the right people to direct it. You got the right cast members in these movies, and so Cap for me was the highlight of this film. Tony, I expected Steve to die in this movie. I thought he was going to die in some capacity. I thought it might be ingloriously in battle, you know, being the soldier, you know, and I thought maybe that might be the way he would be remembered. And Tony, I kind of thought, you know, that I guess I kind of played into their marketing thing that since they showed that scene in the trailer of him talking to his helmet, and I was like, well, that's too easy. They're going to make you think that he's going to die, you know.
Right.
So then, you know, after all that transpired, I was kind of like, well, you know, okay, he's going to make it. And, you know, so they did catch me off guard on things, and I'm glad, you know. I don't want to predict the movie. That's not mine. That would certainly not be joyful for me, and it also would not be what I would want. So in those regards, you know, and I love Tony. I love Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. I mean, you know, he did start it all. The way he handled that character and just breathed the life into that character that even wasn't manifesting in the comics as strongly. He just gave that character so much dimensionality. Beyond what I remember reading throughout, you know, the books, and I enjoyed the books. So, and so in those lines, I totally agree with you, and that was my point too. As far as Thor goes, I completely disagree with you. Completely. I have no question whatsoever. You know, I didn't care for Ragnarok. I remember walking out of the theater after watching that movie and go like, fuck, if I wanted to watch another Guardians movie, I would just rather watch another Guardians movie. You know, I didn't walk out of there going like, yeah, this is the character Thor. This is, you know, in fact, it made me feel like it was less of a character. It felt like you could have made that character, you know, anybody, and he could have played it out that way, and it might have, you know, just been okay, you know, and that's how the feeling I got with it. And then here come the Russo brothers again. I agree with you on that. And they pull in an Infinity War, and I was like, wow. And then they pulled Thor in, and you know, and he was more true to form and more true to character. And I was like, great. You know, they kind of saved Thor for me, and I was like enthused and excited. And then I watched this, and I'm like, holy sheep shit. I mean, I was like, I'd never once felt like this again was a Thor character. It just seems. It's when he's on screen, it seems so contrived to me, and so out of character that it takes me out of the experience completely. It's nothing that resonates with me. Being a fan of the mythology and being a fan of the character, I don't get that, you know, and it seems so off base to me that it really does distract me and takes me out of the experience, which makes me then enjoy it that much less. So I have, you know, when I saw the recent articles that appeared this week and saying that he's still most likely involved in Phase 4, and there's rumor that, you know, Thor 4 will be made, and the director from Ragnarok is in talks to direct that one as well, and his appearance in Guardians, I was like, fuck it, I don't care. You know, I have no interest in watching that movie whatsoever, and I don't want to watch him in Guardians either because, I mean, I like Guardians, but again, the more I watch Guardians on the screen, the less I enjoy them. They're just, to me, very limited and dimensional characters. And at first, the first movie, I enjoyed them. They made me laugh. It was something different, something unique. But it's the same shtick over and over again. And after basically 4 appearances, it's the same. The characters are all the same to me.
So, I think one of the reasons that I disagree with you, Kevin, at least when it comes to Thor, is that I enjoyed the first Thor movie. This Thor, Thor: Dark World was just sort of there. I think we can all agree on that it was at least for the most part forgettable, other than a couple of really decent scenes.
I don't agree.
That's fine. Yeah,
and that's fine. Yeah, I'm not here to jump on anybody's case personally.
Yeah, no, sure, no, absolutely, no, and I'm validating your opinion on Thor as well, because you like that take on the character.
Right.
At least for me, and this was the case with a lot of my friends as well. I felt like at first they had to make the Thor movie to explain who that blonde guy was in the Avengers. They needed to put that forward, and they needed to get that out there. And the first movie, while I enjoy it, still comes off as a bit stiff to me. He doesn't come as a very full formed character.
Right, and I don't get the actor giving it any life other than what was printed on the page.
Yes,
so. He didn't add anything to it either, and that's the impression and experience I had as well.
Definitely. With Thor: Dark World, I felt like it was just also like an also ran in that way, just because we really didn't get much more advancement. We got a little bit more with Loki, but not a lot more with Thor himself. And the villain, I barely even remember anything about Malekith. He was just sort of there.
See, and that's odd. And again, it seems to me like that is a split movie, just like Ang Lee's Hulk. It's kind of like there's no in between, and that's kind of what I kind of see from what information I either read online or whatever, or hear from hearsay or other people's opinions. But it's either you like the movie or didn't like the movie.
Oh yeah. And that's the case with a lot of people.
I like the feel of it, and to me, I thought the atmosphere and everything about it that director brought to that movie felt like I was watching a Thor movie. He captured the realms, and I really felt that to me that was more true rendition of what I remember reading as in Thor comics. And I do remember Malekith, and I thought he was a decent villain. I love the Walt Simonson Thor run, and I thought that's awesome to have him in there.
Right.
So I appreciated it for that level, as well as I thought he felt like a villain to me. He just wasn't there just to be there or to be defeated. He had some depth as a character, and in all 3 Thor movies, Dark World's actually my favorite Thor movie.
Wow. All right.
And because obviously, like I said before, Ragnarok to me tanked as far as I'm concerned. But I get it. And like I said, that's just you're gonna have it.
Yeah. So, no, absolutely. And I think that Ragnarok existed because in order to get Chris Hemsworth feel more of the character, to get him more interested, to get him more into the character, they had. Well,
I kind of think when I was talking to Matt about it, he said the right word to me, and he said lobby, because I feel that that's kind of what's transpired, and I've seen interviews with him, and it's kind of like he's basically said that he's more into this character now again. I guess he kind of was into it in the beginning. It kind of plateaued for him, and now being able to do this comedic version has breathed life into it for him again, and he's interested as an actor, and he wants to. It made it reinvigorate his enthusiasm with the character, and I good for him. But to me, it's so off character. It's just not something that I appreciate or enjoy, and I don't think. I'm not trying to pick apart anybody, but I don't think he's that great of an actor to be honest with you. So, and the things about Ragnarok I was excited about, because, Hela and Kate Blanchett and all that, that was brilliant. I was like, wow, I love that, so there was things that I liked about the movie. I didn't think the whole movie was a piece of crap, but it was so unbalanced for me because just the other stuff just took it out, and it started with that whole trailer scene where, you see him facing off against Hulk when they finally released enough information that you saw Hulk was in, and it was, Planet Hulk, molded into a Thor movie, and you see them fighting, and you've seen Hulk and Thor fight already, and Thor can be kind of cocky and strong and proud as a character, but I mean, to sit there and have him stand there and go like, oh yeah, he's a friend from work, and I was like, fuck, this is gone, this is already down the chute for me. It's just, and it's just my take. Again, please, I don't disrespect anyone's opinion, but
of course not.
Chris, I love you, but I mean, I disagree with the fact too. I was really hoping Bucky would get the shield. I mean, I really thoroughly enjoyed when Brubaker did that in the comics, and I remember talking to Tom Brevoort, and I remember reading in interviews with Ed Brubaker, and that was only supposed to be a short-term thing, and the fans just sucked it up, and it was done so very well. To bring back a character that that was dead for decades, and they did it so brilliantly well that even I was enthused to read the books, and I know a lot of people were, and obviously very successful. So they ended up, continuing it for way longer than it was originally intended. And I was kind of hoping that would transpire in the movie. I was expecting Cap to die, and I thought, well, that would be just great to give that version of Cap to Bucky, and that's like the natural progression with their relationship as friends and, camaraderie, which you got in Civil War, and they just built that relationship every time they were in a movie, all the way from first Avenger, and so that was just my take. That I was like, wow, I really would have enjoyed if that's what they would have done.
I think. Well, I agree with you that the Winter Soldier storyline is one of my all-time favorites. I mean, it's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. I think that is my favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah, I think in the context of the movie and the comic version, yeah, absolutely. But I think in the context of the MCU, for me, it made more sense to make it Sam because Bucky has just only recently been deprogrammed by the Wakandans. The world knows him as basically a assassin, and Steve was working with Sam throughout some of these films, and I think the Steve Rogers of the MCU, the Steve Rogers who's sitting in that therapy session and doesn't bat an eye when the gay guy is talking about going on a date, he's going to recognize that Sam Wilson's the man who should pick up the shield. That's how I interpreted that in terms of right at this point now. To kind of piggyback off that, I'm looking at the movie universe as it's totally its own entity in many ways. Yeah. Obviously it relies heavily on the comics for source material, as it should.
Right. But
these characters have been so heavily developed now within the films and the TV shows and so forth that I think it's natural they kind of go in different directions. Now, I mean, what you said about Hemsworth, I can understand that because, and Ian's right, because I've read the same reports. He was getting bored, and he clearly has a penchant for comedy, like he's going to be doing the next Men in Black film, for example, with Tessa Thompson.
Yeah.
And he clearly wanted to take the character in that direction. And I should say, by the way, the first Thor film was one of my favorite Marvel movies because I think it's so perfectly captured in that first film. Asgard and Thor and Loki and that whole dynamic. So I know.
There were some things that were really good about it, and some things that were, So I agree with you that there was, a lot. There was a lot of positives in the first Thor movie, but it just was, it felt like a build-up movie. It was, an introduction and sort of a, let's get this rolling kind of thing. So I enjoyed it for that aspect, and I want to be clear that I don't go into these movies. I don't want. When I reference the comics, when I say that in my, regards to what my experiences are and such, I don't want, regurgitation of the comics onto the screen. I mean, to me, that would be boring. And that was my experience with Sin City. As much as visually as an artist, I love what they did and what they were able to accomplish. But I remember watching the movie in the theater, and I'm just like, well, that's that panel. That's the exact same thing. That's the exact same language. That's the exact. And I'm like, wow, I've already seen this. You know what I mean? So it was like, the only reason I really enjoyed it that much is just because how visually compelling it was. So I don't want that experience. That taught me that that's not what I want. I don't want a regurgitation. I want their take on these characters. I want them to build on them. I want them to, maybe do some things that haven't been done in the characters. I think that makes them fresh, makes them new, and I agree with you, Chris, that I don't look at these characters as the comic, the movie versions of these comic characters. I believe they have evolved into something greater than that, and I'm grateful for that, especially because of what they've accomplished, which in film history is, unprecedented as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, sure.
I like what Kevin said about Thor and Bucky, because I kind of looked at it as becoming Cap. I know what you said about being recently deprogrammed, but I looked at Sam already has kind of an identity as Falcon. It kind of goes with what I thought. Dick should have never been Batman's successor. It should have probably been Jason Todd. But this is his redemption. So I'm back to who I should be. Now let me take the shield and redeem myself. Especially because then he could be anonymous. Who knows who's under the mask. But with Thor, I think I would have been able to. It would have bothered me less with his appearance, because I kept thinking, well, surely when he powers up for the final battle, he's going to get that Asgardian cutback. And then in the end, it just he just looks embarrassing doing all this fighting. I kept thinking, would he be able to be more of a threat to Thanos if he had shedded 100 pounds during the fight? That's especially when he had both hammers, or I guess the axe and hammer. That that would power him, and it would just give him back that muscular look. And instead, it was just wow. So they're just going with this, the Thor Lebowski.
For the points you say that he shouldn't be Cap and Sam should be, are the reasons I'm going he should be Cap, and Sam shouldn't be. I like that. He spent how much time in Wakanda? I mean, it wasn't I'm understanding it. I took it it was probably he spent a year or so in Wakanda, so, and then they finally felt that, when they knew the threat was coming, they could use whoever they would. And even Black Panther even says it, that he feels that he's ready, that's why they gave him the arm and brought him in. And after what happened to him in Civil War, especially, I thought that gives that character a chance for redemption, and to me that's intriguing as a watcher of the movie, or a listener. Not a listener, but a reader of the books. That gives me something that I'm this gives me depth and gives me something tangible about this character, and I want to root for him. I want him to redeem himself and give himself a chance to. So even though that he would be in the symbol of America and the strong symbol of a character, and to take that role, I totally expect that most people would not, be that receptive to it. But again, that only adds to much more of an intriguing and interesting story to me.
Right.
So,
mentioning Lebowski too makes me think that nobody was like, "Hey, Jeff Bridges looks a lot like Obadiah Stane."
But I did think that was interesting that Tony called him Lebowski, because and it didn't occur to me until a couple days later when I was watching on one of the stations had Iron Man. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, he's in the first one and he played the Lebowski. So is that a little callback to Jeff Bridges?
It very well may be.
Well, for me, The Big Lebowski is one of the greatest movies ever made, so I'm fine with any reference to that character anywhere, basically.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either.
I abide.
Shane, go ahead. You're going to say something.
With Cap and Bucky and Sam, here's how I took the end. I think Cap told Bucky everything he was going to do, to the point where he may have even said, hey, I'm thinking you should have the shield. And Bucky said, no, I'm not ready yet. Give it to Sam. Because when the end happened and Cap flew away to return all the stones, Hulk's, when he's not coming back after 5 seconds, Hulk's flipping switches like crazy. Sam's panicking, going, get him back, get him back.
Shane.
Bucky's the only one that's standing there knowing what's going to happen. He's not panicking. He's looking around trying to find where he is. And when he notices, oh, there he is, right where he said he'd be, or close to it. Hey, Sam, go check that out.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, I even think one of the interviews with the directors after the movie was released, they actually did touch upon that nod, was not like, yeah, go give it to Sam. It was the nod that, he understood what was going on with Steve, and he, I think, had some understanding of what his intentions were.
Oh yeah,
and that was a nod of agreement more than you know.
Well, and he even says, I'm going to miss you, when he's going away for what's supposed to be 5 seconds.
That's true.
Right.
Yep.
And he said, "Don't worry, it'll be okay."
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of insinuates that he did kind of know something. So
I think he knew everything that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He told Bucky, his best friend, his lifelong friend, "This is what I'm going to do, and you're the only one that's going to know it."
Yep.
And as much as I love Steve, and as I love Chris Evans playing that character, and everything that they've done with that character from his first appearance up into this movie, I like that he got that chance to be with Peggy.
Yeah.
But it made me at the same time go, well, this ain't right. I mean, and here you get into the whole, I don't want to get contrived into the whole time travel thing. But
so real simply, if you whether you think he's in a parallel Earth or not living this life,
right?
Normally, Cap would not stand by the sidelines and just let everything else happen. But knowing that it's going to be okay, he could do that. As well as after seeing what Tony went through, he decided that, yes, he was going to do what Tony always said he should and get a life and live his life, knowing that everything's going to be okay in the end anyway. Now, is that right? Does he let everybody die? Does he let all this stuff happen? Yeah, I think he does, because it happened. It doesn't matter if we think it should or not. It's already happened.
Yeah.
Well, and I get that point. I mean, my point is the fact that when he stayed back there and lived his whole life back in that time, to me, then that's screwing up the time stream.
So Kevin, so the way that worked, and I read an interview with the Russos, and also I read a really compelling article. I think it was on Forbes that I'll link to on the forums once this episode is out. The Russos made it perfectly clear that Cap lived his life in an alternate time stream, because the way that they establish, the way time travel works in this is that if you change the past, you're creating an alternate time stream. So, but they also establish in the movie that if you wind up back in the past and then you go further into the past, you're not creating an alternate timeline. So the way it worked for this is essentially he went back to 1940, lived his life. There was another Captain America running around because, frankly, that's the way that time stream now worked. He very well could have lived that life until about a week after the events of Endgame, and then used his last Pym particles to get back to that bench. And essentially gets him back to his original timeline.
I don't know, because I just think to myself, it makes me wonder, like any person he then had communication or interaction with, it changed. It does alter things, and
right.
Well,
so
unless that's the way things always were.
Exactly, that's how it always was.
He's in a continuous time loop, and that he was his future was always going to be in his past.
Yeah.
And I know people say, well, why would he just stay on the sidelines when the world's going to shit during that time frame? And I kept thinking, well, if he knows, if I alter anything, if I warn about Hydra or anything, Thanos wins. So I almost look at it as whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I have to stay by the sidelines. I can't do anything and let everything proceed as I know it does, because ultimately, if I change anything, Thanos wins, and then this will, it's all been wasted.
And also in Winter Soldier, there's the one part where Steve's in the Smithsonian watching an interview with Peggy, and she says about how even after his death, Steve's still changing my life because he saved the man that I married. I just took that as, and I get what the Russos are saying, and that's fine. It's their movie. They made it. But I also think it's completely plausible that she's just keeping Steve's secret, that he's the person she's talking about, that she married. And he's just living his life with her. Doesn't matter that nobody else knows that.
And even when she's on her deathbed, she's on her deathbed and she's like, Steve, you came back. That could have been an Alzheimer's moment, or it could have very well been, her remembering that as part of that Alzheimer's moment.
And in all of her family pictures, you never see who her husband is.
Nope, not one.
Well, I assumed it was the guy from Agent Carter.
I did too until this.
Yeah, that's what I did.
I did too until this.
Yeah.
Yep.
But my theory also still stands that she could have very well married somebody else. She could have kids and all that jazz, but he just lived his life in an alternate timeline and then bounced back to ours.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any of these make sense. And frankly, that's the thing about the time travel in this, exactly. Why the hell not? There's a Loki running around there somewhere because of what they did in 2012.
Obviously we don't know time travel, so we can't sit there and argue and say, was it real or not, or is it possible or not? I mean,
oh, sure we can.
But, there's to an extent, yes. But because I even look at it go too, like, okay, you went and you went back, you got the stones, you came back, you did this, and now you got to go back and put the stones back, so that way you don't change time.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, okay, and they clearly stated like he went back to, this time, went back to that time, and they gave the dates on the screen. They emphasized that. So I'm like, okay, so now you went back and put the stones back where they all were. Well, doesn't this all just happen again?
But they
all the stones are in the same place they were when Thanos got them the first time.
Except for the Tesseract, because Loki still stole that when he was arrested and disappeared.
Yep.
Well, potentially. I mean, he could have gone back, that he would have stopped there. I guess almost like a Back to the Future, even though apparently that's bullshit. Maybe him going back to replace the stone alters at that point. Which I have to say,
but then you don't get Loki away to be in this new series coming out either.
I have to say, to go back to when they did the Avengers, it's kind of the behind the scene things. Adam, do you remember when we did supposedly I was a part of it too, but musicals in high school, and we always had this idea that there should be a musical that's like behind the scenes of a musical. So you never actually see the performers on stage. You always see what goes on behind stage. So it's a lot of cursing, nudity, but just talking about, man, that show, that song fucking sucked, or the crowd's not into it, or whatever. That's kind of what I felt like when we saw some of the scenes from the Avengers, where it was like Tony would go, okay, well, there'll be time for posing later. And then you see like Hawkeye grab a drink from the bar and, using the elevator to go down. So I was like, man, this is kind of like that whole concept that we came up with back in high school about the show behind the show.
Yes, I remember the title we came up with was a 4-letter word.
Well, Murd, as our resident time travel expert, what did you think about the time travel physics of this movie?
Fairly sloppy. I understand that it has drawn a fair amount of nerd criticism on the internet for that, and I don't entirely disagree with those people.
Do you think it would be better, Adam, to call it conveniently sloppy?
Well, yeah, that is exactly what it is, Shane. I mean, it's still, it makes good emotional sense, more so than it makes science fictional sense. It does sort of require the canny geek viewer to suspend his or her disbelief a little higher than the average Marvel movie. But yeah, I'm appreciating a number of the points I'm hearing here. It's absolutely a fact of Marvel Universe time travel, and I do tip my cap to the screenwriters, Marcus and McFeely, for giving us that in so many words. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to alter the past in any way by traveling back in time. All you do is split off an alternate reality.
Isn't that the Mark Grunwald rule that he established?
I think so. I think I read that somewhere that was noted as.
Yeah, was when he was in his time when he was editor and what comes at Marvel. That was something that he implemented. You know, that let's handle this time travel this way. This is how Marvel will handle time travel. That was his rule.
Yes, and he sure as hell lived by it.
Absolutely.
Read enough of his stories to know. But yeah, so Cap really should not have been able to just age naturally forward back into the same present from which he left, because the instant he got back as many decades as he went, even if he didn't do anything to interfere or tip off his fellow heroes or anything like that, by his very presence in the past, he was creating an alternate timeline.
Exactly.
Right.
But I am willing to accept Ian's explanation, probably put forth in that Forbes article he mentioned, that maybe he used some kind of time travel gimmick, the last of his pin particles or whatever, to propel himself back into the timeline from which he departed.
Right.
To sit there on that bench at the end, because he sure as heck didn't get there through natural progression of time. That's not how the mechanics supposedly work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I put it, and because he did take 4 vials with him when he was in 1970, and he was not going to need 4 vials in that process. So it's highly possible that he had that. That many with him to essentially pull this off. Perhaps even coming up with that idea the minute that he saw Peggy, thinking that, if I survive this, I'm going to live my life like Tony said I should.
The burning question I have is, did he encounter the Red Skull in Vormir?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, absolutely. I thought that, I didn't want to get onto that yet as well. But yeah, I was like, he had to go to Vormir and return the Soul Stone.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's two things that I brought up with the question. Is number one, that was a missed opportunity to see him interact with the skull and have to deal with that. But then I also question the fact that you've returned the Soul Stone. Isn't that the opportunity that the Black Widow could then still live?
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's how it works, though. I'm not sure. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I know you can revive people. I mean, with Adam Warlock, you can revive people with the Soul Stone.
True.
But because you had to sacrifice somebody to get the stone, if you return the stone, their soul could be replaced. In essence, But again, it's argumentative depending on how much direction they want to, how they want to do it,
Right.
But
I had seen someone tweeted out something I thought was funny is imagine what the look on Red Skull's face when Steve comes back to return the Soul Stone. It's like it was Natasha, daughter of Ivan, Clint, son of Edith.
Yeah.
Stephen, son of a bitch.
That bitch's name is Sarah, I'll have you know.
exactly.
How do we feel about the Black Widow's death?
I have to say,
me.
Yeah, it was one of these things where I had no idea. Sometimes you can kind of guess, well, who's going to be the one. Even up to the last moment, I was like, who's going to be the one who sacrifices himself? Because you could look at either character and like, well, I could see why she's going to be the one who gets it. And then the other time you're like, well, I could see why Clint's going to be the one. Just because the way things were unfolding. I really had no idea until you actually saw her dead body there.
Yes.
You know what?
What was that like for you, Matt, going to see a movie without knowing every single one of the plots?
Let's say I knew enough that I wasn't one of these things like, holy shit, because I was able to pay attention to, like I said, there's been so many reported leaks that I found myself down the rabbit hole looking at that I put together enough of the movie to get an idea. There were just like I saw at one point Thor was supposed to get impaled, so he would have died. The Hulk put on the gauntlet and he lost a leg, not a leg, his arm. So for the most part, nothing really knocked me over with what was going to happen. It was somewhat predictable, except for that scene.
I wasn't quite thrilled with them killing off Widow. I felt like this the story was pretty much setting up Clint to be that individual, and of all the Avengers, Black Widow's had the least character build. She's had the least background. She's had the least time on screen out of everybody. Like, I feel like she's the one we knew the least about. Which, great, we're getting this solo movie set in the past. We're going to learn so much more about her. But now it's happening after she's dead, so it feels a little
much more poignant for that.
True.
Well, I disagree with you.
Anytime they want, they could bring anybody back. Really.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping in the solo movie we get Dottie from Agent Carter, but I have to disagree with you, Ian, because I got it, and of course down the rabbit hole was somebody. There was a site that was complaining about she didn't get a funeral, how she wasn't developed, and I got back and forth with somebody that between her and Hawkeye was a lot more underdeveloped up to this point because she was in more movies. I felt like you had more of an idea of who she was. And Hawkeye, aside from having a secret family, what really was there about him? He was always kind of like there in the background.
Fair.
And so I was glad. I thought she had a heroic death because to some extent I looked at it as if she lets Clint die, she'll have all this red in her ledger where his family's back. And in the end, would they rather have her Aunt Nat or would they rather have their father?
True.
So it had to be heard. And I agree. And I also thought she didn't get a big funeral. She had just the original members there mourning her death because that was more of an intimate setting.
They were her
like what
family.
Tony got at the end would just seem like, all these. I understand she was an Avenger and people knew who she was, but that would have seemed more out of place to me than kind of the intimate setting of just the originals mourning her, saying, this won't be for nothing type of thing, and using that as, we got to follow through on what we did here.
Right.
And Matt, let me concur with you wholeheartedly because Tony Stark was a celebrity who belonged to the world. Natasha Romanoff was an espionage agent who was an assassin.
And leaked everything.
Yeah, who found redemption through the Avengers. And you'll notice that what I thought they did wonderfully in this last film, like when everything's sort of settled into this doom and gloom after Thanos snapped his fingers, what is she doing? She's like running the Avengers, right? Because she found purpose and she found redemption with that team. And in a way, I think they really did develop her character because she appeared in a lot of other films. And I always go back to, again, in Winter Soldier, when she and Steve are driving in the car.
In the truck, yeah.
It's one of the best scenes in that whole movie. Again, it's a quiet moment where they're talking about like how they view what they're doing.
Yeah.
And she's talking about – she's basically describing what her life was and what she did as an espionage operative. And – again, it's great writing, great acting. You really get a sense of who she is and really how tragic and broken she is, and how you can tell that she completely reveres Steve.
Yeah.
Because the fact that and they sort of wonderfully develop their friendship throughout these films, and she also finds redemption in him because he's Captain America and he utterly embraces her without judging her past, because the Black Widow's a murderer. I mean, the Black Widow. I hope they don't. I hope they don't chicken out in that film. They got to show what she was really all about.
Yeah.
And what she was doing, and the fact that Steve totally embraced her as a comrade, as a fellow warrior, and most importantly, as a friend. And I thought her death made complete sense. And like Matt was saying, she's not going to sacrifice Hawkeye's family. And plus, I think Hawkeye as a character was so shortchanged in general in these films. It was great to see them use him more in this movie and to open the film with him seeing his family vanish.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And have I heard that he's going to have a miniseries?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, with Kate Bishop.
Yep.
Good, because as we know, as lovers of the comic, Hawkeye is such a rich character, and Jeremy Renner is a great actor. And if they give him more to work with, you've seen I can tell that he gets who Hawkeye is. They just got to give him more to do with the character. And once they do that, I think it's going to be even more satisfying. So I thought Natasha's death really made sense in the context of what was happening.
I did appreciate the Ronin aspect of this movie. Yeah, and mind you, technically the first X-Men crossover, since he went ahead and killed Silver Samurai in this movie. So
yep, I noticed that.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. I doubt it was the same character, but still, nevertheless, it was the guy who played him in the Wolverine.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about? I loved how they used Ant-Man in this film.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because Murray mentioned this in a previous discussion. Because Hawkeye and Ant-Man weren't in the last film, so I think they made a point of really emphasizing their importance in this story. And I mean, Scott was all over this movie. Not only for his tried and true humor, which no one does better than Paul Rudd.
It really is America's ass.
Yeah, he was so important to helping them deal with the issue. And we all predicted, all right, the quantum realm, or in our case, the microverse, is going to be really important. And sure enough, I mean, that was, in many ways, he was a linchpin of the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I liked how all of his two solo movies have heist as part of it. So I like that this was called a time heist.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was listening to another review of the movie, and they said, looking back, do you realize how this movie could not have been made if, say, the last two, if Guardians of the Galaxy wasn't embraced? Ant-Man, kind of people like Ant-Man and Wasp, some people were like, yeah, whatever. If that doesn't work, if they don't put that movie out, you're not really going to have this, because that's where you get the whole explanation for the quantum realm and him being lost in there, and him getting the idea of, hey, this is what we can do. So I was glad to see that they increased his profile, because I'm really hoping there's a third movie. And he had we haven't really got too much into the final battle, but he had one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when he punches a Prometheus as Giant Man.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when he pops up out of the remains of the Avengers complex after Doctor Strange talks to Wong, and he said, what, you want more? And then all of a sudden they look over and there's a Giant Man holding Rocket, War Machine, and Professor Hulk.
I love that War Machine was wearing the Iron Patriot armor when he got out of the rubble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I also like when they were debating about the time heist. I think it was Tony that looked at him and said, "You based this time heist on Back to the Future?" Like, that's not going to work.
Marvel
How do we
comic.
react to the Smart Hulk?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Not as smart as I wanted him to be, but it was fun. And it was fun to see him be able to embrace being the Hulk in the movie more often than not. Before that, it was always Rage Hulk, Angry Hulk. This was more fun to watch.
I thought he was going to actually die in this because I guess supposedly Ruffalo was kind of done. But then I heard that they're in the works of doing a She-Hulk series on Disney Plus that Ruffalo will have some type of involvement in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of glad you got something. I liked how last time you really didn't see any of the Hulk, and then this one you basically didn't see any of Banner.
Yeah.
So I liked how we're kind of getting. So when they went back to the 2012 Avengers and he was talking more, that seemed out of place to me, knowing that in any of the movies since he didn't really talk that much until Ragnarok. But this professor one, I was like, okay, we got something different. We got a combination. He's not as strong, I'm assuming, as Rampaging Hulk. But no, I didn't mind. I thought it was something new that for that particular character. I felt.
Murd, what did you think? What did you think of Professor Hulk?
Well, a little bit of additional humor, a little bit of additional intellect, which was necessary to make the whole time heist thing work. They needed as many smart people in the room as possible, so that's fine. Yeah. A little something extra for Ruffalo to do, and he even got to appear more or less as himself when the Ancient One kicked him out of his body for a little bit.
Yep.
I love that part too.
And it's further emphasis to the non-comics reading viewing audience that more than most other characters in the Marvel Universe, the only constant for the Hulk is change.
Yep.
So just glad to see them sticking yet another familiar permutation of the Hulk's multifaceted psyche up there on the screen.
And I should point out, the two times I saw the movie, the audience was just uproarious when he appeared as the Smart Hulk. Like, people were so into that.
Oh yeah.
People really got a charge out of it. The audiences I was watching the movie with.
The selfie when they're at the diner, that was beautiful, and I loved when he had to rage out and smash when they're back in 2012, and he's like, this seems a little gratuitous,
Well, I loved how he was embarrassed at first when he's watching himself rampage through that Avengers battle in the first movie. The first Avengers movie is like, oh god. Yeah. I guess it just tries it, but it's not really working for him.
Yeah.
One of my favorite reactions to that version of the Hulk came from our friend Kyle Miner via Facebook. Because he had posted, I was expecting this movie to be a buffet of masculine eye candy, but I was not expecting the hotness that was the Hulk.
Well, I thought it was definitely so. I think before Ragnarok, around the time Ragnarok came out, they did an interview with Mark Ruffalo at one of the Disney, I guess, conventions about getting a solo movie. And he's like, there will never be, because Universal doesn't want to play with Marvel Studios. He said, but essentially, if you take the Hulk parts out of Ragnarok, Infinity War, and at that time he just said the final one, you'll see that he essentially has his own movie because he has a definitive arc. And I thought that held true, that you could see between those three movies, essentially, if they could pull that out and give him his own movie, just with those parts. And so I thought that was definitely true of what he said.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to point out just struck me, because we were talking before about Guardians, and I think Kevin has some very valid criticism. I mean, I love the Guardians movies, but I see where he's coming from in that. What I thought they set up very nicely here, and to kind of give the Guardians a different take, and I again respect the writing, the directing. They didn't chicken out with Gamora in that she this version of her does not, she's from the past. She doesn't know anything about what happened with Quill and the relationship and the Guardians and the whole nine yards. And I think that might make the next Guardians movie very interesting. And yeah, they're going to have the humor and all that, which I enjoy, but that could bring an edge to it that we're not accustomed to.
And you bring up a good point, because to me, that's the first time that I really felt that she was the type of character that I remember, that I'm familiar with, because this did give her an edge, and she was, portrayed that way in the comics. She wasn't, this funny character, that fit. I mean, she was fierce, and even though she was a good fighter in these movies, I never really got that real edge to her, and like you said, in this I did, and I'm like, that does intrigue me, and it does give you something different, which is what I'm looking for if you're going to do more Guardians. So.
Well, I was just gonna say, will it be a search for Spock type of thing?
I've been hearing that. Yeah, you're not the first person to say that about her, and
nothing I do is original.
I hope not.
And I appreciate the fact too that it doesn't even break the time travel, because yes, she's a Gamora, and that is now literally from an alternate timeline. Because it's an alternate timeline where Thanos and his people got sucked into our reality's future and perish there. So she can still run around as a member from an alternate timeline in our reality.
And with her, I like that she was, while not knowing anything about her and Quill's relationship or what happened in the first two Guardians movies, I like that she's just before she was going to betray Thanos anyway, and ended up doing it to help Gamora after what Nebula said.
Yeah.
That she still is the same person at heart. She just hasn't had all that experience that we've now seen.
Right.
And by the way, I wanted to point out, Shane, you just beat me to the punch. One of the real stars of this movie for me was Nebula.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how they used her character in this film.
Well, I was just thinking, out of the Guardians, she's probably the least developed, and this one made her feel more developed. And you got to see her, I think, a little bit differently, especially when you got to see her past and her present, how much she's changed and kind of the abuse that she had to suffer.
Yeah, and I think it was one of the things too. Like when she came on the screen and I saw what she did, it made me go like, "Oh, that bitch," and I was like, it made me, it made me get into her. I was like, oh, wow, here's the villain. Here we go. You have this presence, and it was a refreshing, addition to the character. They did breathe more life into her, which is synonymous with the Russos and the writers. With the characterizations is where it's at for them, and that's why I look forward when they're on a project. So
and having Karen Gillan in this movie as Nebula wasn't even the only Doctor Who reference to be had, because there's a Doctor Who episode called The Time Heist.
Yeah, that's a great episode.
Yeah, which also just surprises me that, at least from what I'm aware of, there's never been a Marvel comic called The Time Heist, because you'd think that there would have been a story somewhere with that. I'm sure it's hidden in some random, series that I'm not even thinking of, but it doesn't come to mind.
If there hasn't been, there will be now.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of Doctor Who stuff, going back to Shane's much earlier question about the fates of Tony Stark and Steve, I was pretty sure that Tony was going to end up dead. And I wasn't a lot less sure about what was going to happen with Cap, but I was pretty sure he would be sidelined one way or another. Mm-hmm. But kind of a weird tertiary theory that I'd had was that the Infinity Gems were going to alter reality so profoundly that suddenly Tony Stark and Steve Rogers suddenly and retroactively looked like entirely different actors. Kind of a Time Lord style regeneration.
Oh,
that's scary bird.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I actually half expected them to wind up in that pocket universe from, was it Rebirth?
Heroes Reborn?
Heroes Reborn.
Oh my God.
Inside that blue ball.
Was anyone surprised to see that Steve was finally worthy, or to hear Avengers Assemble? Because I remember texting Kevin and I were breaking a lot of CGS protocols with this. Texting him beforehand, I was like, I'm pretty sure those two things are going to happen after all this time.
So I figured they would happen.
The minute, and I mean the minute, that Thor found out that he was still worthy and got that Mjolnir from the past, I'm like, okay, Steve's going to have that by the end of this movie, because there's no way we're ending Steve Rogers' whole character arc without him finding out that he is also worthy.
After he nudged it.
And it was important to do that because from the standpoint of the history of the comics, the character, and for the audience, you needed to see Captain America fight Thanos.
Oh, yeah.
And you needed to see Captain America essentially defeat him because in combat, and like when Thor said, "I knew it," like that was a fun moment. And calling back to the second Avengers film when they're having that, they're hanging out at the party. And that goes right to the comics when Cap is one of the handful of people besides Thor who is worthy to lift Mjolnir. And I mean, the grin I had on my face when he lifted that hammer, because we've been waiting for that for 10 years. Yep. that was going to happen. And it made perfect sense. And the thing I wanted to say, we're talking about that final battle. I think Josh Brolin was so freaking terrifying as Thanos.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just not even just when he's fighting, but just when he's. I mean, granted, he's doing like is he doing a motion capture performance?
He is, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so when he's just standing there and like Gamora like drops to her knees in homage before him, and he makes some off comment about like Ronan is thinks too much with his emotions and or something like that, and just the sheer awesome power of that character, and throughout both films, you're always like, I don't know if they can beat him. Like, I was never convinced, even through this film, that are they going to definitively defeat Thanos, because he's basically a demigod, even before he has the gauntlet.
Right.
So I was so utterly satisfied by Brolin's performance of Thanos, and even when they go to like Mert, how much did you love him in the Garden Planet? With like picking the fruit and
the Scarecrow was present. Yep.
Yeah, it was right out of the books. And just when they got him, they're going to kill him. And just like he just said to them, "Is like, I'm inevitable." It was so pitch perfect. It was thrilling to see that.
Literally my only issue with the Thanos from the past was the fact that he must have put on different clothes that day, because in Guardians of the Galaxy, that's not the armor that he was wearing.
That's true.
I like the scene where right before Cap gets the two-way communication from Sam, where you see the silhouette. It's a pullback shot. You see the silhouette of Steve standing there with a broken shield, and you just see like Thanos and his horde on the other side. Just like, this is it. This is coming down to Steve versus everybody. And then, he hears the voice, and then they start playing Portals is the name that the theme that was played, and everyone came out. But what do you guys think about the 3 weeks later type of thing initially, and then Thanos right away gets killed? Did that catch anyone off guard where you're like, holy shit?
Yeah, I was surprised by
executed curveball. Yeah,
that was great.
I was sitting there and the word 5 came up, and I literally say out loud, please say years later, and then it just finished. I'm like, yes!
Well, what was great about that was it almost showed the futility of what they were doing, because Thor cuts his head off, but it doesn't matter. Like Thanos, and again, there's almost like that dark nobility of Thanos. He said, well, I destroyed the stones to avoid further temptation.
Yeah. Well, yeah. One of my favorite shows, I brought it up before, and I'll bring it up again. If you have not seen The Leftovers,
I know you told me that. Yep.
I know that this is this. I knew I knew that the series was going to go this way, but I didn't expect it to go this Leftovers. Just in the way that, the way it starts off with the cold open and everything, that, and the disappearance is like, I literally felt like I was watching an episode of The Leftovers.
Well, Ian, that further intrigues me. Now, once I finish Game of Thrones, which is going to take me a couple years, then I'll watch Leftovers.
Well, when you do watch Game of Thrones, this past week's episode, make sure to adjust the colors on your TV before you watch.
Okay, well, I'm still in season 3, so it's going to be a while.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now go ahead, Shane.
I liked how the trailer that we saw most often, everything in there happened in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yes.
So that you're like, oh, wow, everything that we've known already happened. So we have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. It was fun to not have almost nothing past that point.
Yep.
A couple things, but not much.
Yeah.
Now, what did we think, because we've been talking about it a bit now, what do we think about how they, framed and used that final battle? Like, what was your reaction to this final conflict, the epic confrontation at the end?
I was glad. Well, one of the things I did like about the movie is I kept fearing that Captain Marvel was just going to be the one who swings, it turns the tide, and it's going to be a lot of basically almost like a sequel to her movie. And I did read some articles that they dropped the ball with this. I'm glad that she was in there sparingly. Yeah. And to some extent, she didn't steal the show at the very end, because at the end, I wanted this to be about the original 6.
Yeah.
So that was something I liked. I liked how I'll be honest with you. I liked the quote unquote girl power moment in Infinity War. Mm-hmm. In this movie, it felt forced, because to some extent I was like, all right, so you have the 3 characters in Infinity War. You have Wanda, I forget how you pronounce her name.
Okoye.
Okoye, that's right. And then Black Widow. Okay, it makes sense that they would be close enough that they could kind of back each other up. And in this one, it's like every single female character came together, and it's like, well, where are the guys? Like, there's no guy in the immediate area besides Spider-Man, who, by the way, should have his mask on the whole time and stop telling people his fucking secret identity. But anyway, so to me, that just seemed forced. That we got it taken care of. Well, that just seemed, like I said, it seemed forced. I didn't like that moment. I like the notion of more female characters, but I thought that seemed too over the top, and it was almost like a pandering moment, and I didn't think it was needed.
Yeah, it was like the story had pretty much entirely given way to spectacle at that point.
Yeah. It was definitely a little bit forced. I'll agree with that, but at the same time, my entire theater popped, and so did I. Just at the framing of the shot, I actually appreciate.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
Was it heavy-handed? Yes, but was it thrilling to see? Absolutely.
And I love seeing that Pepper in that style armor.
Oh
too.
yeah, that was cool.
Very close to the superior Iron Man armor. I was thinking that, like, less rescue, more superior Iron Man.
Now, one question I have for you guys. First of all, a little bit of setup. Again, I love how they show the awesome power of the Scarlet Witch, which can never be overestimated.
Yep.
It's about time.
No Vision at all.
Yeah,
I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
Yep, I was surprised by that.
We were missing Hawkeye and Iron Man Ant-Man in Infinity War, so I guess he's the MIA for this movie.
Yeah, but we
now, aren't they getting a show?
Yes. Wanda.
Yeah, Vision and Wanda,
Yeah.
It's cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's going to have a 50s style, they said. It's not necessarily going to be taking place in the 50s, but it's going to have a 50s style, which makes me think
Interesting.
that
More Tom King's
yes,
storyline.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. Is that
That's what I thought, too.
they're going to wind up probably adapting that for the screen in one way or the other. Perhaps Scarlet Witch tries to bring Vision back and brings him back wrong. That may be what winds up happening here.
Right, ends up warping reality into a kind of synthezoid Pleasantville.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, something along those lines. But we may not have gotten Vision, but hey, at least we got Jarvis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure did. Did you guys like that scene from the 70s? I thought it was nice to have a scene that you haven't seen before.
Now,
and each character, and Tony and Steve kind of got one of those realization type, I guess, moments.
Yeah.
And it was great to see Tony reflect with his father.
everybody knows how sap I am with father-son stuff, so I ate those scenes up like crazy. I loved when he got to talk to him a little bit, how he kind of got to thank him, and while Howard really didn't quite understand what was going on, Tony loved it. It was perfect.
Oh yeah. My only thing is that because you've got two different actors playing Tony Stark, and yet you had James Darcy show up as Jarvis, looking exactly like he did from years prior, and yet Tony Stark looks like John Slattery rather than the other actor who's been playing Tony Stark. So that's a bit of a issue that they were going to be impossible to avoid.
I heard, and I'm hoping these things are seeds for the future.
Yeah.
Did anyone get? And Kevin did because I sent it to him. But did anyone hear the name of the missing agent that Peggy mentioned when Steve was watching her through the glass?
No,
I couldn't hear.
Couldn't make it out.
No, Agent Braddock.
Oh,
wow.
Captain Britain as in, or possibly Psylocke.
So
wow.
I was reading this article that said it could be the father. Could it actually just be a young? Captain Britain's kind of associated with S.H.I.E.L.D.
Wow.
But they said the article was basically they doubt that it was just thrown out there like nothing.
Huh.
No,
Like, there
they
had
don't
to been
do
a reason for it.
Yeah, had to be something for it. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is the earthquake in the ocean. Immediately, my brain went to Namor. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I didn't even think of that. That's a great point.
Yeah. Because Dwayne Johnson's been making like random comments about like having meetings with Kevin Feige. He better not be playing two pointy-eared people for DC and Marvel because that would be a bit ridiculous. But I think it's about time we get Namor in one way or the other.
One other thing I want to point out about Tony and Steve was I think they did a wonderful job in this film of sort of the culmination of their relationship.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is so important to the whole essence of the Avengers and the Marvel Universe. And, they did not gloss over the differences they had. And when Tony comes back gaunt from out in space, he's saying, look, I wanted to put a shield up, over the whole planet and this whole thing. And, and then he comes in the sports car. And he's like, the bitterness is corrosive. So he's like, yeah, me too. And they so establish again the bond between those two men, which is in part is because of the bond Steve had with Howard as well. And you can tell that that Tony's jealous of that to some degree. That Steve had that relationship with his father, which they hint at that jealousy in other films. But when Tony gets off the spaceship and he's like, I couldn't stop, and Steve's like, yeah, we couldn't stop him either. And that's so vital that they maintain those arcs, and then they took that through to the end. It was wonderful. The other thing I wanted to point out quickly before I forget, there was a great comic moment. I'd like to think I'm not off base here. When the triumvirate comes out onto the rubble of the headquarters, Thor, Iron Man, and Cap, and Thanos is standing across from them, I thought, oh, that's the cover to Avengers 92, which is a classic Neil Adams cover from the Kree Skrull War, where the three Avengers are standing on rubble and they're banishing Quicksilver, because it's actually Skrulls in person, but they're banishing Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye. And the way they show them on the rubble, I'm like, they got to have looked at that cover. Could be wrong, but it was a thrill for me all the same.
Oh, and since we mentioned the 70s, we have to mention Stan's cameo.
Just make love, not war.
I love
the shroom.
Yeah. and they de-aged him to look like he did from that one image that always floats around the internet of him all posed.
I like that they had. I like the fact that again they brought back people. So you saw Hank back in the 70s at the Shield location, and then at the funeral scene they brought everybody. So even Janet was there. I said to Adam when I saw him this past weekend, I was hoping that they would have had Betty in there as well, just kind of a nod to her as opposed to just Thunderbolt Ross. But for the most part, I mean, and I liked how there was all this internet buzz. Who's that one guy just standing there?
Yes,
Iron Man 3, Harley Keenan.
Yep. I figured it out then, but I was lost at who that was.
Puberty has treated him really well because he looks completely different.
Well, he was in Jurassic World, and I thought he looked different from that. And that was more recent. But I said this to Adam. I'd have to watch it again, and he said it wasn't the case. I was almost under the impression after the original remaining 6, you kind of saw the way the groups were together and it panned through. It was most recent to the oldest appearances. But Adam brought up the fact that with Carol being next to Nick Fury, that throws that whole thing off.
Yeah.
But originally, because remember at the Justice League Unlimited, the end of the series, they kind of grouped, the Trinity, and that's what I thought. Okay, so that's what they did here, but that got shot to shit because apparently that's not the case.
Speaking of that scene, I was disappointed that Maria Hill and Coulson weren't there.
Maria Hill was there.
I really thought at the funeral.
Yeah, Maria Hill was there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally missed.
She was near the back. Yep. She was actually not too far from
She was
Harley.
next to Thunderbolt Ross.
All right, well then I missed that, but I was surprised that they didn't bring
Coulson's alive.
They
don't, and that's why I thought that sometime during this movie they'd bring it up.
Well, and let me bring up as well one of the reasons why they were able to get everybody for that scene is they actually filmed that scene the same day they were doing an Entertainment Weekly 10 years of Marvel photo shoot.
I was wondering if they did it then.
So everybody was in town at that point, and they filmed it both as a wedding and as a funeral.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I was watching Sebastian Stan, a clip of him on Jimmy Fallon, I think, and he said everyone was under the impression it was a wedding.
Yeah.
Until they showed up and realized 2 people weren't there because they were all supposed to dress up for it. So, and I do have to say, I like the fact that you're hearing these actors during the interviews and they're like, we haven't seen the movie, so we can't tell you anything of what we do know, and we only had the information about the scenes we're in. So like we're looking forward to seeing this in the theater just as fans are, with no idea what's going to happen for the most part.
Downey's the only actor who got the full script.
I think was it just Robert Downey Jr.?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. is the only one that had a full script. Yeah.
So I like the idea that they really kept this thing locked down pretty well, of not revealing even to the actors to let Ruffalo or Holland let it slip of what was going on.
I did see a few interviews where Benedict Cumberbatch said he read the script, but he didn't say he had it. He said he read it.
I thought that was just for Infinity War. I did also like the fact that they had dummy scenes filmed to throw people off.
Yeah.
By the way, because you're talking about other characters, the probably one of the few disappointments I have with this whole arc, so to speak, is they kind of dump Sharon Carter.
Yeah.
Because I thought when Cap goes back, how weird would it be? Hey, I really got into your niece for a little bit, but then I came back to you.
Well, if you watch Agent Carter, how did
figuratively
have
and literally, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think I don't really think they really like the character of Sharon Carter that much to begin with. So it honestly doesn't really surprise me much that she didn't show up in this movie. She never really got the time of day, even in Civil War. Like, she was just sort of there.
He kissed her.
Well, yeah, but that's about it.
I was thinking, I was also surprised that Scott's ex-wife and Preston weren't in.
Yeah,
even
I
just
was surprised by that.
At the very end, where you see Hope and Cassie and Steve or Scott on the steps, like you didn't see them at all.
And Lupita Nyong'o's character as well, although she was probably filming another movie at the time.
Well, yeah, she wasn't in Infinity War either.
Right.
Yeah, there's one thing that I would have liked to have seen, and would have been that I would have liked to have seen a character, and I don't care who it was. I mean, I didn't have a specific character in mind, but somebody that would be somewhat argumentative in regards to the approach of having to rescue, quote unquote, what happened with Thanos, and to reverse all that. And I wanted to see some character come in and go like, well, maybe there is some, natural thing here, that this is just a natural part of evolution, and maybe this, is something that, kind of needed to be done. Maybe I don't want to go, try to reverse it. Maybe this should be set the way it is. And, I would have liked to have seen some sort of kind of, discussion that way, and have some sort of interaction with certain characters. At least have one character kind of bring
that would
it
be
up
interesting for sure. Yeah,
devil's advocate. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
In some ways, Cap did that, Kevin, because in the conversation when he first gets back to the Avengers headquarters with Scarlet Witch, he mentions that he saw whales in the Hudson when he was going over the bridge. And he's trying to put it on the bright side a little bit, and well,
again, which is so befitting of the character. So I mean, that's
exactly.
Yeah, I like that. Well, the other thing to me is that what I get out of this is that no matter how you perceive time travel, no matter what you accept out of time travel, to me, you've muddled with time travel in some way, shape, or form. And even if all the realities stay in their time streams or whatever, you've there was interruptions, and there was, muddlement with it. And I'm thinking, wow, this really could lead right into having Kang, show up.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Which obviously...
Yeah, Murd called that when I saw it. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, well, that gives the opportunity for Avengers, but I'm even more so hoping that it gives more opportunity for Fantastic Four.
Absolutely.
Marvel focuses more on those characters after this, and I would love to see Fantastic Four be the next centralized group of heroes in the next phase of Marvel movies, as the Avengers has been in these first three phases.
I still hope that's who they write in that Tony sold the tower to.
Yeah,
that's long been your theory, Shane.
Yeah. And
one more comment I'm going to make, then I got to go, Jim, because I got to get up soon and teach. And you guys prompted this thought of mine, is that what Thanos wanted to do, I mean, terrifying, but when you think about in the real world and the problem of overpopulation, it all goes with it. That's what's so terrifying about what he was trying to do, because, like nobody tells, I think it's Gamora, like, your planet's a paradise now, for example, after I wiped out half the population. And I mean, it's not something that's necessarily like on the surface, these movies, like they're ramming that down your throat. But when you really think about it, you're like, man.
Well, that's what that's how it brought me to that kind of wanting to see that addition into the movie, of having a character have that point of view, because in essence, that was part of my point of view. I was just like, well, it's easy to be said with humanity and what we do to our planet and how we treat each other, and with overpopulation and not enough food and GMOs. I mean, you just get so into it, and it's just like, well, there could be a reality where this is, maybe that is the truth here, that, we, and of course it was done universally. So it wasn't just focused on mankind and Earth,
right.
Which I thought was, obviously important. But yeah, it raises that question, and that's why when you can, which to me makes Thanos more of an interesting character, because like, it's you can look at it and go like he was accepting of it. He saw what it was, and he saw what even they even made that offhanded comment about him being a prophet, and I'm like, it's not about just if he's a prophet or not. It's the fact that he foresaw what truly could happen and probably will happen, and he's like, I just got to do this, and this is what I believe in, and this is what I believe is in the best interest for everyone. And so it made him a very compelling character, and I do applaud them for doing that, because he could have just been very short dimensional, and but that gave him so much heart and so much depth as a character on many levels.
And I hope they gave Jim Starlin a percentage.
Yeah, they did.
I watched him that he was happy with the movie.
He was. Yeah, I watched an interview with him, and he was very, very pleased. He liked that what they did with Thanos, and the fact that they made him into what they did, and gave him that dimensionality as a character. He was very receptive to that and grateful for that. So
goodness knows he's not easy to please when it comes to Thanos.
No, absolutely not. You're right.
Gentlemen, I apologize. I have to depart because duty will soon call.
Yeah, I won't be far behind you, but
I want to give my frecking swears.
How many?
Oh, it's 5. Without question.
Definitely.
And Kevin and Matt, so thrilled you joined us. Thank you.
Yes,
good to be here.
You, Chris. Always good to be with you. So.
All right, brothers. I'll take my leave, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Sounds good, man.
Take care.
Good night. Take care. Bye.
I have to say, one of the things I don't like about the movie is now it's forcing me, in a way, to see Far From Home. I was on the bubble about it. But I want to see the kind of epilogue to this movie, since that's now officially the end of the Infinity Saga.
yeah.
Here's something, Matt. Now, are you telling me that every single person that Peter knew was snapped? Because
that's what I was thinking too. It has to be.
Yeah,
everybody was.
That's the only way.
The ones coming back for the movie.
Yeah, right.
People would graduate. Well, I heard somebody talking about. Well, so let's say if you were married and you come back 5 years later, it's like, so you remarried? I've only been gone for 5 years, or you live by yourself and you owned a house. Well, what happens to your stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about all your money?
What about the people?
Global power and economy. I mean, this.
Oh my God!
What about people that couldn't handle what happened and committed suicide or something?
All of this stuff happened, and it's all the stuff that they are not going to mention because it's too.
Just going to sweep it right under the rug.
Yep.
And that's what's kind of eating at me now. I find it. It's
2 seconds.
I'm sorry. I know that this 5-year gap thing struck a chord with you, but it's.
Yeah.
If they're going to treat it in any way remotely seriously, I mean, the ramifications of it would take a whole movie in and of itself.
Right.
Just to show how the Marvel Universe Earth rights itself after having its population cut in half, and then 5 years later, after they've had enough time to reconfigure and compensate for the missing population, redistribute global power and all of that, that half the population suddenly gets dumped back onto the planet, thus triggering a second cataclysm. And
I agree entirely. I agree entirely, Murd, and that's why I hope that specifically the Falcon and Bucky Disney Plus series touches on that at least a little bit. Because if that's supposed to be taking place after the 5 years, who better to deploy into the world to try to make sure that the world is right as it is now than essentially the disciples of Captain America.
Well, I do have
an excellent opportunity to explore that, and also a good chance to renegotiate the thorny issues of Captain America's legacy, as raised earlier in this very program.
Very much so.
Well, I guess we're going to miss out because I guess now the MCU is at 2023, so to some extent we're missing out on the opportunity to have 2020 Iron Man go back and meet Tony. But the other thing I kept thinking that they were just going to get rid of the last 5 years, just with the snap, jump back 5 years.
I thought they would safeguard everybody, like especially Tony's family, but still reset it back 5 years.
It complicates matters too much.
I wasn't even thinking about Tony's family. Like everything would just go back like it never happened these 5 years. And then when he said about, don't get rid of anything that's, whatever, just bring him back. I said, that's right. He has a daughter. Oh my God. Now that's kind of weighing on him. So to kind of throw everything off, he's reminding Banner, you can't get rid of what's been going on the last 5 years. You just have to bring everybody to the future.
Yeah. And I mean, it also does make sense, at least with the rules of time travel that they've established, that they would just be essentially creating an alternate timeline if
they did that.
If they did that, so it's it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't such a scenario. Yeah. But I definitely want to see them address this in one way or the other and not sweep it under the rug, whether it be in the movies or whether it be in the Disney Plus series.
I just read today that apparently the very last reshot shot and effects portion that they worked on was up until January, after Tony absorbed the stones from Thanos, from the glove, the gauntlet, and they're moving into his in the position. Mm-hmm. Tony didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then when they were editing things, the editor, I think his last Jeff Ford or something like that, said he should say something. What about I am Iron Man? And they liked that idea, and that was the very last thing they were able to get in contact with Downey, obviously, do everything, and that was the very last reshot shot that they did. So I thought, when I saw that, I thought that just seemed so fitting. But the fact that eventually he was going to have nothing said seemed more off-putting. Not off-putting, but weird.
Awkward.
It would have definitely unbalanced the movie had he just done the snap and not actually been able to say his farewell line like that.
Well, and he's so quippy anyway, so it seemed weird for him to be quiet.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of how he can be quippy, which I love Tony Stark being quippy, I did like when Peter came back. Peter was a little bit eccentric acting, and Tony just kind of settled down and just grabbed him and gave him a big hug. Like after being distraught all that time for what happened to Peter. I
lost the kid.
Yeah. It was just a nicer moment than I thought that they would, than what I thought was going to happen.
They needed that moment. They certainly did, because essentially, even though Tony had a family in this new in this new 5 year later time period, he was a major father figure to Peter. That's the way they set it up, and it was like losing a son. And even though he had a daughter now, he got his son back too.
Yeah. I want to ask. Did anyone else notice there's a lot of news articles and news clips saying that this is essentially the end. This is the last MCU movie. Because that's one of the things I kept seeing, and I kept thinking, this isn't the end. This is just kind of closing this chapter
right,
and moving on.
Yeah.
And it led me to think, now that Marvel has basically the definitive blueprint on what they can do, what they have to do, how it works, I think if they could go back and rework some of the phase one that they would to make it more cohesive, less continuity issues, and other studios have tried and failed. Do you think 22 movies from now they could replicate this, or this is basically the only time they're ever going to get this right moving forward? This might only be another 5 years before the MCU is nothing.
I think it's possible that it could be nothing in 5 years. I'm hopeful that it won't be. But I do think that general population, general people who have become enamored with these movies may not go back as much, at least at first, as what they have so far without Cap and Tony in it.
That was one of my concerns as well, especially Robert Downey Jr., I think. And I think if you bring him back in any capacity, you completely piss on his ending.
Oh, yeah.
Unless it's some type of a flashback.
Well, yeah. What I think, if it in any way, shape, or form they're going to bring Tony back, it will be as an AI along the lines of what a Friday or Jarvis are for whoever,
and teaching his daughter things.
Yeah, like that I could see, like something. In fact, they've already borrowed some stuff from the MC2 universe. Bringing in Hope the way they did. What if they bring in Mainframe?
Yeah.
They already did.
Did they?
And Guardians Volume 2, Miley Cyrus does the voice of Mainframe. At the end, when the Ravengers show up.
Okay, all right, but that's a different Mainframe though.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. The Mainframe I'm thinking of was essentially the Iron Man of the MC2 universe, which was A-Next, and it was a sentient armor. Like it was just a sentient armor that even when destroyed could just transfer its consciousness into a new armor and then be out like that. So maybe if they wanted
to. I think the next thing they'll do is that they'll just go back and say all this was Skrulls.
I half expected a little clip where you did see one or more of these heroes.
Well, there is
Skrulls.
something in there. There is something in there. I read an article today briefly. I
the
didn't
high
get to
school?
read the.
Yeah, in the high school.
Who's the actor that plays Talos in Captain Marvel?
Yeah.
He's supposedly in the background of when Peter goes back to school.
Yep.
Yep, that's what I read too.
He is there, and that is somewhat confirmed. That. So that just goes to show you that
a lot can change.
That was
from the
a seed
90s.
well planted, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot can change from the 90s until 2023. So maybe the Skrulls got a backbone. Who knows?
If Jamie was here, I think he might appreciate this to some extent, and I think you will too, Shane, since you like Star Trek. But so I was watching one of the things before the movie came out, and it was a round table of the original cast, and Kevin Feige was there, and they were being interviewed for Entertainment Weekly. They shared some nice stories of interactions with Stan, but at the end, Feige kind of reflected that at the very, I guess, series finale of Star Trek: The Next Generation, everyone got together and played poker. I think it was.
Yep.
And Picard never did. And in this one, he did show up, and he's like, I'm doing something that I've always should have done in the past.
Yeah.
And that's the way he felt about that round table, that he always had things going on, but he should have always made time that they all could have got together and hung out.
Yep.
And then if you notice that they basically did the Star Trek 6 ending where the original 6 had their signatures.
Yeah, I did think
so. I thought that was a neat moment to see their that kind of ending for those guys.
I thought so too.
If there was going to be a final scene to this movie, considering Tony while back in the past in 2012 said I'm going to go get a slice before he winds up getting hit in the door by Hulk. If there was going to be a final scene in this movie, I would have wanted it to be all the Avengers at a pizzeria, a la shawarma style, just getting a slice for Tony. And
you do mean all of them, right?
All of them, yes.
All 3 dozen or however many characters that makes.
Exactly, yeah.
Divide along the Wakandans and the Mystics and all those people.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Brooklyn is out of pizza.
This was one of the other criticisms I read, is that they were saying that basically the Wakandans were used as cannon fodder in the final scene. But I noticed the writer missed is, if you look, it's not just the Wakandans that showed up. You had the Ravengers there. You had the Mystics and the new gods, the new Asgardians. And I kind of thought it's not Pip, but who Peter Dinklage played. I thought it would have been neat to have him come out running as well.
Yeah, I was expecting him to come out of the portal too.
Another giant person running around the battlefield would have been nice.
Yeah.
Somebody's there, by the way. Somebody's there that eagle-eyed viewers pointed out.
I missed him.
Moon Knight?
Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck.
Oh,
Yeah, Howard the Duck.
Yeah, I missed that too.
Damn. They should have made him a little bit more. They would have been obvious instead of have to zoom in for it.
Yeah. Now, Moon Knight, we're gonna have to wait for.
Well, the writers, Marcus and McFeely, said they would love to do a movie.
All right.
For him,
okay.
so.
Why not? All right, gentlemen. I think we're near shooting our bolt at this point. Any final thoughts you guys want to bring up before our freaking swears?
Go see it at least 5 times.
Wow.
Just one more time, but
Wow.
Go see it.
Yeah,
one more time.
I definitely think at least
I did that
at
for
least
you,
twice.
Kevin.
I want to get at least another time in.
Yeah.
I think there's so much going on, you almost have to do multiple viewings.
Yeah.
That's what home video is for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
I'll do that too.
I did see it at the Alamo Drafthouse my second time around, and they have a half-hour pre-show. And one of the videos they showed was a battle scene between Darkseid and Thanos that somebody put together.
Oh, wow.
So that was a nice little fun little thing. And the rest of it was previously on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where they basically just went through all 22 movies before you wound up at Endgame. So that was pretty cool.
Anyone need a potty break?
Nope.
For 3 hours?
I made it through.
I survived.
8:15 in the morning. Nope. It was good.
We're the real
drink-
Iron Men.
Yes.
I stopped drinking 2 hours before. I was like, I don't want anything in my system.
I peed like 3 times before the movie just to be on the safe side.
I was the same way as well.
Yep.
Make sure it's completely bone dry.
I love going to movies early, and when I saw I could only get 8:15 a.m. showing, man, perfect.
Yeah, I'd Shake Shack before the movie, and it was just long enough before the movie. I got a small drink, not a large, a small, and I got through it. And I'm like, nothing else. Let's do this.
Yeah, I didn't crack open my water until 2/3 of the movie. I was like, I'm not touching this until later in the movie.
Exactly. And then as soon as the movie ended, I chugged that sucker down.
Oh,
no one had the line, somebody peed my pants. It might have been me.
Speaking of which, one more thing before we wrap up. Any lines stick out to you in this movie as favorite lines? Because I had one, and it was the interaction between both Caps when the older 2012 Cap was, I could do this all day, and our Cap was like, I know.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that is America's ass.
Yeah, I like that. At the final scene, it was such a climactic scene when you saw all the other portals start opening up and you see all the reinforcements pop through. But right before that, Sam's flying around and he goes, "On your left."
Yes.
You know, and I was
Yeah.
that was perfect. I loved it.
I liked I Love You 3000.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was good too.
Yeah. That was pretty great.
Or even the I like cheeseburgers. Your dad liked cheeseburgers. I'll get you all the cheeseburgers you need.
That was beautiful. Yeah, I teared up a little bit of that.
Line in there.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, it was the America's ass thing also. I liked when Scarlet Witch got her moment and Thanos says, "I don't even know who you are," and she says, "You will," and proceeds to drop mountains on him.
Yes. I liked Wong's "What You Wanted More."
Yeah. I liked when they were running down all the time travel movies. And it's like Die Hard. Wait, that wasn't one of them. Or even the Back to the Future is bullshit.
Yeah. I did think about you right when they said Die Hard. I'm like, wait a minute.
The greatest Christmas movie out there.
Oh
yeah, if you say so.
And I like Tony questioning, like I said earlier about Paul Rudd saying you based this all on Back to the Future. I did like that one a lot.
It's like, so a time machine? No, not a time machine. Okay, a time machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would all not have been possible except for a rat.
Yes.
Yep. the real unspoken hero of the movie.
Exactly. Nobody talks about the rat. Without the rat, it would be nothing.
I think one of my boys said about that after the movie was over.
I look forward to the Avenging rat coming soon.
Marvel Studios can do no wrong. They can turn any character into gold.
Well, I exchange emails with.
Will the rat be named Willard or Ben?
I exchange emails with a raccoon, so.
Yeah. He eats garbage. Technically, he's not a raccoon. He eats garbage. Yeah.
All right, we could go on forever, but
sentimental moment, favorite moment for me. Shane, you got your father and son fix from the Tony and Howard Stark thing. I'm glad that Thor got his mother and son moment.
Oh yeah,
Russo one more time before she makes her heroic sacrifice.
And apparently, I thought they were new scenes, but they just used unused footage of Natalie Portman.
Yes.
But she did do a voice. She did add a little bit of
voiceover.
Yeah. But we never talked about Rocket, but I thought he had some good lines in there throughout this whole thing. Like, I thought you were Build-A-Bear. It was called like Ratchet. He's like, it's Rocket. Or when he made Hawkeye promise to bring back the Benatar in one piece, and he's like, I'll do what I can. He's like, as promises go, that's not too convincing. Yeah. So he had some good one-liners in there.
He's always a welcome addition to.
Yeah, Mantis using Mantis's one big line. Oh yes, use knives.
It got a big laugh at our showing.
Yeah. All right, frickin' swears, gentlemen. Let's roll it out. Murd, how many frickin' swears?
Solid 4.
All right.
Bring on phase 4.
Yes, good point. Shane?
I'd still give it a 5.
Yeah. Matt?
I'm going to go 4.5.
Okay. Kevin?
I'm going 3.
You know what? I'm breaking the scale. 6.
Ooh, wow. 6 Infinity Stones?
6 Infinity Stones, yes, out of 5.
Wow.
It may just be the hype. It may just be the fact that it was a conclusion. It's just, it hit every single button it needed to hit for me. So we'll see how I feel in a few years.
Yeah, I am kind of concerned because initially I told Kevin I thought it was pretty good, I believe. And then I've been watching my favorite clips, somehow. and it's got me more and more jazzed. But I think if I rewatch the whole movie, there's going to be kind of move it back. So it's a good chance it'll wind up at like about 4. But thinking about all my good scenes, or my favorite scenes in the movie, that gives that a little extra push.
Oh, yeah. Always.
Always, yep.
All right, guys. This was an epic episode for an epic movie. So
yes,
thanks.
Fitting,
yes,
as it should be.
Yes, it is. And one more raise of the glass to Mr. D before this night is out. We're thinking of you, brother.
The pimp hand remains strong.
Always. Kevin, thanks again for joining us, man. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, yes.
You're here.
Please. I appreciate you, including me. Obviously, I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. So, thank you.
Well, we've got an upcoming top 5 that we'll definitely wind up including as many people as possible on because it's about time we go through the MCU. So we'll figure that out soon. And
please, yes, I would be more than happy to partake in that.
Sweet. And Matt, good to talk to you again, Matt.
Likewise.
Hell
Looking
yeah.
forward to the next time.
Yes. All right, Shane, you ready to roll us out?
Yippers.
All right.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To send us an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com and let us know your thoughts on Endgame. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time. And I love you, Jamie. Miss you, buddy.
That's how you end it.